I'm Justin, 28, and up until a few months ago, I was the guy who kept the family running, financially, at least. Rent payments? I made them. Internet bill? In my name. Even my brother's car insurance was quietly auto-paid from my account, because apparently, I was the responsible one. I didn't complain too much, because I had a good job in tech, lived comfortably, and honestly thought helping them out was just what you did when you loved your family. That changed the night I got that text. I had just finished a late shift, sitting on my couch with takeout when my phone buzzed. I'm quitting my job. You'll cover my rent. No question mark. No please. Just a statement like I was some sort of family ATM. For context, my brother, Kyle, is 25 and has always been the golden child. Growing up, he was the kid who could do no wrong. Missed assignments were my fault for distracting him. Broken windows were blamed on me even when I wasn't home. I'd hoped adulthood would even things out, but nope. If anything, it got worse because now money was involved. I stared at the message for a full minute, chopsticks suspended midair. I could feel that familiar wave of irritation rising in my chest, the one I'd swallowed 1,000 times before. I typed back, "Pay it yourself," and hit send before I could overthink it. 5 minutes later, I was pulling up the contract I'd been offered for a job overseas, a position I'd been hesitating to take because of family obligations. That night, I signed it. An hour later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was my mom. "Don't come home for Christmas until you co-sign his $200,000 loan." My jaw dropped. $200,000? For what exactly? Kyle's latest business idea, a sneaker reselling startup, had already crashed and burned 6 months ago. He still owed me for the shipping fees I'd spotted him back then. And now my mom was issuing ultimatums like I was some kind of villain for not bankrupting myself on his behalf. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I sat in silence, letting it all sink in. The years of being the fallback plan, the fixer, the quiet provider. My hands were shaking, but not from anger. From clarity. Something in me clicked that night. I got up, grabbed my laptop, and went through every single account with my name attached. Utilities, streaming services, phone plans, you name it. One by one, I removed my payment info. By the time I went to bed, the only thing I still paid for was my own rent. And that was only for another 2 weeks until my move. By morning, my phone looked like a slot machine going off. 52 missed calls, 17 texts from mom, 10 from dad, and Kyle spamming the family group chat with messages like, "Are you crazy?" and "I'm going to lose my place." I just set the phone down, made coffee, and watched the sunrise like nothing happened. For the first time in years, I felt free. Later that day, mom called me again, voicemail this time, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. "Justin, what did you do? The internet's down, your brother can't make his car payment, and your father is furious. Fix this now, or don't bother coming home." I didn't fix it. Instead, I poured myself into preparing for my move. Every box I taped shut felt like a small act of rebellion. At work, I started handing projects off to coworkers, secretly enjoying how light my calendar was getting. But the messages from my family didn't stop. If anything, they escalated. Kyle started sending me photos of eviction notices, as if guilt tripping me would magically make me open my wallet. Mom shifted from angry to pleading, saying I was tearing the family apart. Dad even left me a voice message calling me selfish and ungrateful, which made me laugh out loud in my empty apartment. That laughter died down quickly, though, when they showed up at my place unannounced 2 nights before my flight. I opened the door to find Mom and Kyle standing there, faces stormy. Mom pushed past me into the apartment without waiting for an invitation, and Kyle followed, arms crossed. "You can't just abandon us," Mom said, voice trembling. "Your brother's life is falling apart." I leaned against the counter, arms folded. "You mean the life where I pay for everything while he plays video games all day? Yeah, that life's over." Kyle's face went red. "I told you, I'm quitting to focus on my real career. This is what family does. They invest in each other." "Funny," I said, "because I don't remember anyone investing in me when I was working double shifts in college just to afford textbooks." Mom gasped like I'd slapped her. "That's not fair," she said, but there was something flickering in her eyes. Guilt, maybe? Before I could press further, Kyle slammed his hand on the table. "If you don't co-sign the loan, I swear." I cut him off. "You'll what?" "Not talk to me. Promise." The room went dead quiet, the kind of silence that feels heavy enough to crush you. Mom finally grabbed Kyle's arm and pulled him toward the door, muttering something about seeing what Dad has to say about this. The door slammed behind them, leaving me standing in the middle of my half-packed apartment, heart pounding. I thought that would be the end of it, that they'd go home, cool off, and let it go. But I was wrong. The next morning, I got an email from my bank about a suspicious attempt to access my account. Then another from my credit card company about a declined application for a $50,000 line of credit in my name. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about money anymore. This was war. I sat staring at my laptop screen long after the email notification faded. A $50,000 line of credit attempted in my name. My first thought was that it had to be a mistake, some random identity theft attempt. But when I called the bank and confirmed that the application had been filled out using my address, my phone number, and even my middle name, a chill ran through me. Only a handful of people knew all that information, and 3 of them were currently blowing up my phone. The bank rep on the line was professional but curious. "Do you know a Kyle?" she asked. My stomach dropped. "He listed himself as an authorized user on the account you were supposedly opening." I hung up, paced my apartment, and tried to calm my racing thoughts. This wasn't just entitlement anymore. This was fraud. Kyle had crossed a line, and my parents were enabling it, maybe even cheering him on. Not 30 minutes later, my mom called again, voice sugary sweet like nothing had happened the night before. "Justin, sweetheart, I talked to your father. We think the best thing is for you to just co-sign for Kyle. It'll save everyone the trouble. He's been through so much lately." I didn't answer right away. I wanted to scream, but something in me refused to give her the satisfaction of a reaction. "You mean the trouble of committing fraud?" I finally said, my tone flat. There was silence on the other end for a moment before Mom snapped. "Don't be dramatic. Kyle was just trying to help you understand how serious this is. You're being selfish." That word again. Selfish. It hit me like a slap. I thought of the years I'd spent covering their emergencies, driving home from college on weekends just to mow the lawn so Dad wouldn't have to, paying for Mom's car repairs when she said she was short this month. And now I was selfish? I hung up before she could say anything else. The next few days were a blur of escalation. Kyle posted passive-aggressive memes on Facebook about brothers who don't care about family, tagging me in some of them. My dad sent me a long email calling me immature and vindictive, and accusing me of tearing the family apart for something as small as money. I kept packing, but the worst was still to come. The night before my movers were scheduled to arrive, I got a group text from Mom. "Family meeting tomorrow 6 p.m. Non-negotiable." I didn't reply. At exactly 6 the next day, just as the movers were hauling my couch out of the apartment, my parents and Kyle showed up again, this time with my dad leading the charge. He didn't even say hello. "What is wrong with you?" he barked, stepping into my half-empty apartment like he owned the place. "Dad, no," he interrupted, jabbing a finger at me. "You think you can just walk away from your responsibilities? You think you can leave this family in shambles while you run off to play expat somewhere? You're not a child, Justin. You don't get to abandon your brother." I could feel my jaw tightening, my nails digging into my palms. "I'm not abandoning anyone," I said quietly. "I'm just not your doormat anymore." Kyle rolled his eyes dramatically. "You're overreacting. It's just a cosign. Literally, just a signature. You make good money. Why are you being so difficult?" "Because I don't trust you," I said, locking eyes with him. And judging by the attempted credit line in my name, I was right not to. Mom gasped. "You had no right to snoop into that." I laughed, a bitter, humorless sound that surprised even me. "Snoop?" They called me Mom. Because apparently, my brother can't even commit fraud properly. The room went quiet for a beat. Dad's face turned a shade of red I'd never seen before. "Watch your tone," he growled. "You don't speak to your mother like that. She doesn't get to defend fraud." I shot back. For a moment, no one said anything. The movers carried another box past us, glancing nervously at the tension crackling in the air. Finally, Dad said, "If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back." It should have hurt more than it did. But all I felt was this strange, calm clarity, like I'd been holding my breath for years and was finally exhaling. "I wasn't planning to," I said simply. Kyle muttered something under his breath, something about me being a failure, and I saw Mom put a hand on his arm, like she was afraid he'd push it too far. "Let's just go," she said finally, voice tight. "We can figure this out without him." As they left, Dad slammed the door hard enough to rattle the frame. The apartment was suddenly silent again, except for the sound of the movers loading the last few boxes into the truck. That night, I sat on the bare floor of my apartment, eating cold pizza straight from the box and thinking about how things had gotten to this point. There had always been favoritism, the extra Christmas gifts for Kyle, the way my parents always took his side no matter what. But this was something else entirely. This was deliberate, malicious even. The next morning, I woke up to find that my email inbox had exploded. My parents had copied me on a thread they'd sent to the entire extended family. Aunts, uncles, cousins, accusing me of financially abandoning Kyle and breaking the family apart. Some of the replies were sympathetic, but a few of my relatives jumped in to lecture me, saying I should step up as the older brother and remember blood is thicker than water. It felt like I was being put on trial, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty about it. If anything, their desperation just made me sure that I was doing the right thing. But then Kyle did something I couldn't have predicted. He showed up at my work. I was in the middle of my final team meeting when the receptionist pinged me on Slack. "Hey, there's a guy here asking for you. Says he's your brother." I stepped out into the lobby, and there he was, looking smug, arms crossed, like he'd just caught me doing something wrong. "We need to talk," he said loudly enough that people turned their heads. I grabbed his arm and steered him outside. "What are you doing here?" I hissed. He smirked. "You wouldn't answer your phone. So I figured I'd bring the message to you. This is your last chance. Co-sign the loan, or mom and dad are cutting you out for good." Something in me snapped. "Good," I said, my voice calm but icy. "Do it." His smirk faltered for just a second, but he quickly recovered. "You'll regret this." I watched him walk away, my hands trembling, not from fear this time, from adrenaline. Whatever came next, I wasn't going to play defense anymore. Because at that moment, I realized they still thought they had power over me. And maybe they did, but not for much longer. The night after Kyle showed up at my office, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, the smug look on his face, the way he said, "You'll regret this," like it was a promise. I had this uneasy feeling in my gut, not fear exactly, but anticipation, like standing at the edge of a cliff, waiting for the ground to give way. 2 days later, it did. I came home from running errands to find a letter taped to my apartment door. At first, I thought it was just another notice from my landlord about my move-out inspection. But when I tore it open, my stomach sank. It was from my bank, an official notice that a wire transfer had been initiated from my savings account. I dropped everything and sprinted inside, grabbing my laptop and logging into my online banking. The transfer was real, $7,500 sent to an account I didn't recognize. I called the bank immediately, panic making my voice shake. After 30 minutes on hold and 3 transfers between departments, they told me the account belonged to a joint holder and that the transfer had been initiated in person. I felt the blood drain from my face. A joint holder. There was only one person who still had access to that account, Kyle. Years ago, when I was in college, my parents had convinced me to add him as a backup signatory just in case something ever happened to you. I never thought about it again. Now he had walked into the bank and stolen my money, legally. I sat there in stunned silence as the banker politely explained that there was nothing they could do since it was a shared account. My voice cracked when I asked, "Can you at least tell me what the withdrawal memo said?" There was a pause, and then the banker said, "It just says family loan repayment." Family loan repayment. My brother had stolen from me and labeled it like I owed him money. When I confronted my parents that night over the phone, I was shaking so hard I almost dropped the device. "He took $7,500 from me." I shouted. Mom didn't miss a beat. "He told us. And frankly, Justin, you should be proud of him for finally taking some initiative to solve his problems." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Proud of him? He stole from me. "You gave him access," Dad said flatly. "It's not stealing if you gave permission. That permission was 10 years ago." I shot back. "He was supposed to use it only in an emergency." "This is an emergency," Mom said, her voice rising. "Your brother is on the verge of losing his home because of your stubbornness." I felt something inside me snap. "No, Mom. He's on the verge of losing his home because he quit his job and refuses to take responsibility for anything. And you are enabling him." She went quiet for a moment, then said coldly, "If you're so worried about money, maybe you shouldn't be wasting it moving to another country. Stay here and work this out like a man." That sentence hit me harder than I expected. like a man, as if moving overseas for a better job, one that would double my salary and open new doors for my career, wasn't manly enough. As if my entire life's worth was measured by how much I could sacrifice for Kyle. I hung up without saying goodbye. The next day, things escalated again. I got an email from my landlord saying that my lease had been terminated early at the request of a family member. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. But when I called the office, they confirmed that someone claiming to be my co-signer had come in and filed the paperwork. I don't have a co-signer, I said through gritted teeth. Well, this person had all the documents. The property manager said nervously. Your lease, your ID number. They even had a copy of your driver's license. I nearly dropped the phone. I knew exactly who had access to that kind of information. My parents. By the time I drove to the leasing office in person, it was too late. The termination had already been processed, my security deposit flagged for refund, and the apartment listed online as available immediately. I sat in my car outside the leasing office, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. They were actively sabotaging my life now, not just guilt-tripping or pressuring me, but tearing down everything I had built. That night, as I packed the last of my belongings into boxes, Kyle showed up again. This time, he didn't knock. He just let himself in using the spare key my parents still had. You have to stop this, he said, like I was the one causing trouble. I stood up so fast the chair nearly tipped over. Stop this. You stole from me. You canceled my lease. You're trying to ruin my life. He shrugged, leaning against the doorway like he owned the place. You brought this on yourself. If you'd just signed the loan paperwork, none of this would have happened. Mom and Dad said it was the only way to get through to you. I felt my hands trembling, not from fear this time, but from sheer rage. Get out, I said quietly. He smirked. Or what? You'll call the cops? Go ahead. Tell them you gave me permission to use the account. I walked to the door, opened it, and pointed outside. Out. Now. He held my gaze for a moment, then laughed. Actually laughed as he strolled past me. You'll cave eventually. You always do. When the door clicked shut behind him, I sank onto the floor, my chest heaving. For the first time, I didn't cry. I didn't feel sad. I felt cold, like something inside me had turned to stone. The next morning, I changed every lock, every password, and closed every account that still had Kyle's name on it. I filed a report with the bank, not because I expected them to fix it, but because I wanted a paper trail. And then I called HR at my job and asked them to move my start date overseas up by 2 weeks. If I stayed here any longer, I knew they'd find another way to sabotage me. 2 days later, I got one last blow, an email from my cousin, who apparently thought he was helping. It was a screenshot of the family group chat I'd been removed from. Dad, he's lost. We did what we could. If he ends up broke and alone, that's on him. Mom, don't talk to him until he apologizes and signs the papers. Kyle, he will. He's not strong enough to last without us. I stared at those words for a long time, then closed the email. Something about seeing it written out like that, their complete confidence that I would eventually crawl back, lit a fire in me. Because if there's one thing I've always been, it's stubborn. And if they thought I'd break, they were about to find out just how wrong they were. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about freedom, about taking my life back, piece by piece, and making sure they could never do this to me again. The morning after reading that group chat screenshot, I woke up in an apartment that didn't feel like mine anymore. Half-packed boxes were stacked everywhere, the couch was gone, and the air felt heavy, stale, like even the walls were holding their breath. I sat there in the quiet for a long time, staring at the floor. It hit me all at once. I didn't really have a home anymore. Not here, not with them. Even when I'd been living here comfortably, I'd still been tethered to them by 1,000 invisible threads, shared bills, emergency phone calls, guilt trips disguised as family favors. Now those threads had been burned one by one, and I was sitting in the ashes, wondering if I'd done the right thing by lighting the match. I'll admit it, part of me wanted to give in. To just sign the stupid loan papers, swallow my pride, and have peace again. To be invited back into the group chat, to get the good son pat on the head, to pretend like nothing had happened. But every time that thought crept in, I pictured Kyle's smirk as he walked out of my apartment. You'll cave eventually. That line was like gasoline on a fire. I went through my day like a ghost after that. I still had 2 weeks left at my job before flying out, but even work felt different now. I stopped talking much in meetings. Coworkers would ask me how things were going, and I'd just shrug, offering some vague, "Oh, you know, busy." Because how do you casually explain that your own family is trying to financially kneecap you? At night, I barely slept. Every sound outside made me sit up, half expecting to see Kyle at my door again, demanding something. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. The years of sacrifices, the little moments where I'd brushed off their favoritism because that's just how family is. It was like watching a movie of my own life, but finally seeing all the plot holes, all the places I should have spoken up, but didn't. The worst moment came a few days later when I went to grab a coffee on my lunch break and ran into my aunt. She gave me that pitying look, the one that says they've already chosen a side. "Justin, sweetheart," she said, placing a hand on my arm. "You know your parents are just doing what's best for Kyle, right? He's younger. He needs more help. You're older. You can handle things on your own." I nodded politely and mumbled something about being late, but inside I was screaming. Why was it always on me to handle everything? When did being the older sibling become a lifetime contract to clean up someone else's messes? That night, sitting on the bare floor with a half-eaten sandwich beside me, I felt the weight of everything pressing down at once. I hadn't heard from any relatives except that one aunt. My parents hadn't texted in 3 days, which was almost worse than when they were bombarding me. The silence felt like exile. I'll be honest, that was my lowest point. I felt completely cut off, like I'd lost my family and was losing myself too. For a moment, I wondered if maybe they were right. Maybe I really was selfish. Maybe I should have just kept paying for everything and avoided this mess. But then I looked around my apartment. The empty shelves, the boxes labeled with my name, the plane ticket confirmation sitting on the counter, and something shifted. I realized I wasn't losing myself. I was finding myself. This was the first time in years I was making decisions purely for me, not filtered through, "Will this upset Dad?" Or, "Does this inconvenience Kyle?" The thought was scary, but it was also liberating. The next morning, I made a list. Not of revenge plans, not yet, just a list of every single thing that still tied me to them. Joint accounts, shared logins, even the stupid streaming service my brother used every night. I spent the whole day closing them one by one, calling customer service reps, resetting passwords. Each confirmation email felt like a tiny step toward breathing again. When I finally closed the last one, I sat back in my chair and felt lighter than I had in weeks. I didn't tell my family I was leaving early. I didn't tell them anything. I stopped replying to messages altogether, stopped opening their emails. At work, I smiled more, even though I didn't feel like it. It wasn't happiness, not yet, but it was relief. The night before my flight, I packed the last of my things and took one last walk through the apartment. I stood in the doorway, remembering all the nights I'd sat here stressed out about bills that weren't even mine, about fixing problems that weren't mine. And for the first time, I felt no urge to fix anything. I left my keys on the counter and shut the door behind me. The airport was quiet when I arrived, that strange, hushed feeling of late-night terminals. I sat by the gate, scrolling through my phone, and saw one last text from Mom pop up. "We heard you're leaving. If you do this, you're not welcome back." I stared at it for a long time, then put my phone face down on the seat next to me. Because the truth was, I wasn't planning on going back. Somewhere over the Atlantic, as the plane hummed quietly and the cabin lights dimmed, I opened my laptop and started writing. Not an angry email, not a plea for understanding, but notes, records, dates, amounts, screenshots of the withdrawal, copies of the bank correspondence. If Kyle and my parents wanted to play dirty, I would be ready next time. And there would be a next time. People like them didn't just stop when they ran out of money. They got creative. I wasn't sure what my plan was yet, but I knew this much. I was done playing defense. Touching down in a new country felt like stepping into a completely different life. And in a way, it was. The first thing I noticed was the air. It was crisp, cold, and smelled faintly of the sea, nothing like the heavy, stale air back home. The cab ride to my new apartment was quiet, just the hum of the tires on wet pavement and the soft glow of streetlights flashing by. For the first time in weeks, my shoulders unclenched. My new place wasn't fancy, just a one-bedroom near the city center with plain white walls and a view of the rooftops. But it was mine. No spare keys floating around in other people's pockets. No one else's name on the lease. No passive-aggressive post. It's on the fridge reminding me to pick up something for someone else. The first night, I sat on the floor eating takeout from a little shop downstairs, listening to the sounds of a new city outside my window. It was quiet, not the kind of silence that felt like punishment, but the kind that felt like possibility. The job itself was better than I expected. My new team actually respected me, not just for my technical skills, but for my ideas. On my second week, I proposed a new process to streamline a system they'd been struggling with for months, and by Friday my manager was congratulating me in front of the entire department. That small moment lit something up in me. I'd forgotten what it felt like to be appreciated without strings attached. I started throwing myself into the work. Late nights at the office, coffee-fueled brainstorming sessions, slowly earning a reputation as the go-to problem solver. The paycheck reflected it too. The overseas salary, combined with a generous relocation bonus, meant I was saving more than I ever had before. I opened new accounts, this time with nobody else's name on them, and began building a financial cushion. It was addicting, watching my savings grow. Every deposit felt like a brick in the wall I was building between myself and the chaos back home. But it wasn't just money. I started working out again, something I hadn't done seriously since college. At first it was just morning runs along the river, but soon I joined a local gym. There was something therapeutic about pushing weight around, feeling my body get stronger as my mind got clearer. I made friends too, real friends, not just people who tolerated me because I was useful. My coworkers invited me out for drinks after work, and one of them, a guy named Theo, became my closest friend in the city. He was blunt in that way only new friends can be. "You don't talk about your family much," he said one night over beers. I hesitated, then told him everything. All of it. The loan, the fraud, the sabotage. He just whistled low when I finished. "Man," he said, shaking his head, "that's not a family. That's a hostile takeover." I laughed harder than I had in months. It was around that time that my parents tried to reach out again. I got an email from my dad, full of clipped sentences. "We need to talk. Kyle is in trouble. Call us." I didn't reply. Instead, I kept building. I started taking on freelance work on the side, funneling the extra income into investments. By month 3, I had more in my emergency fund than I'd ever had in my life. By month 6, I'd completely rebuilt my credit profile, removing Kyle's old access permissions and freezing my credit reports back home. That was when I got the first taste of poetic justice. I got a letter from the bank notifying me that someone had attempted to open another account in my name and had been denied. I smiled, imagining Kyle's face when the clerk told him, "Sorry, sir, we can't process this without the primary account holder's authorization." By then, I'd stopped checking the family group chat screenshots my cousin occasionally sent me. They were all variations of the same thing. Mom complaining that I'd abandoned them. Dad saying I needed to grow up. Kyle posting his usual dramatic one-liners. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even hurt. I was amused. Because while they were busy trying to guilt-trip me, I was leveling up. By the end of my first year abroad, I'd been promoted. The raise was substantial, enough that I could finally start thinking long-term. I opened a retirement account, started building a stock portfolio, even looked at buying property. And then something unexpected happened. Opportunity came knocking. Through work, I got connected to a small startup looking for investors. Their product was brilliant, and thanks to my new savings, I could afford to buy in early. I ran the numbers, did the research, and took the leap. 3 months later, the startup landed a major contract, and my investment doubled. That was the moment it clicked. For years, I'd been pouring money into black holes. Family emergencies, unpaid debts, Kyle's endless disasters, and getting nothing back. Now, for the first time, I was putting my resources into something that paid me back tenfold. I sat there staring at the notification from my investment app, a slow smile spreading across my face. I was no longer the family fixer. I was the guy with options. And that's when the phone calls started again. First from Mom, tearful this time. "Justin, your brother is in a lot of trouble. He's being sued. He needs help." I listened, then hung up. Then from Dad, angrier. "You think this is funny? Your brother's future is on the line." I didn't even answer. And then, a message from Kyle himself, the first direct contact since the day he'd laughed in my apartment. "You win. Congratulations. But you're going to regret letting this happen." I stared at the message for a long time, then closed my phone and went back to my work. Because by then, I had something they didn't know about. Leverage. Between the financial records I'd saved, the proof of the unauthorized transfer, and the trail of attempted credit applications, I had everything I needed to turn the tables if I wanted to. I wasn't sure when or how I'd use it yet, but the day was coming. And when it did, I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to make sure they could never put me in that position again. The moment I realized I had leverage, it was like a switch flipped in my brain. For months I had been on the defensive, reacting, dodging, surviving, but now the balance was shifting. I wasn't rushing into anything, though. This wasn't about screaming matches or impulsive payback. If I was going to strike back, it had to be clean, thought out, permanent. I started by organizing every scrap of evidence I had. It became my late-night ritual. After work, I'd sit at my kitchen table with my laptop, headphones in, and pull everything into a single folder. Screenshots of bank statements, PDF copies of credit alerts, even my old chat logs with mom and dad. I highlighted dates, underlined names. Piece by piece, I built a timeline, a clear picture of how my family had escalated from asking for help to sabotaging my life. The more I pieced it together, the more obvious it became. This wasn't just one bad decision. It was a pattern, a years-long cycle of entitlement and manipulation that I had kept alive by saying yes over and over. One night, while combing through old emails, I found something that made me stop cold. It was a scanned copy of the emergency access form for the bank account Kyle had drained. My parents had signed as witnesses. Not illegal, but it was clear they had been in on it from the beginning. I sat back, staring at the screen. They hadn't just enabled him after the fact. They had been part of the plan to keep me financially exposed, probably from the day I opened that account. That was when I knew this wasn't just going to be about getting my money back. It was going to be about taking back control of my name, my credit, my future, everything they had tried to weaponize. Around this time, my life overseas was hitting a new peak. The startup I had invested in was taking off faster than anyone expected, and my early buy-in meant my shares were worth nearly triple what I'd put in. My boss noticed how calm I was under pressure and offered me a leadership position. Suddenly, I was managing a team, traveling to conferences, and speaking on panels about project strategy. At one of those conferences, I met a lawyer who specialized in cross-border finance and identity protection. Over drinks, I casually asked him what someone could do if a family member had abused their access to a shared account. His answer was music to my ears. If you can prove malicious intent, you can not only recover the funds but pursue damages, especially if they tried to use your credit without consent. That night, I hired him. We started with a full audit of every account I'd had since college. It was eye-opening. There were transactions I'd never seen before, small withdrawals here and there that I'd never noticed because I was too busy working and paying bills to look closely. By the time the lawyer was done, the total Kyle had siphoned off over the years was nearly $15,000. That's not counting what they cost you in lease termination fees and credit damage, my lawyer said, adjusting his glasses. If we go after them, we can make this more than just repayment. We can make it sting. For the first time in a long time, I smiled a real smile. But I didn't rush to file anything. Instead, I took my time building a case so airtight that even my parents couldn't twist it into a misunderstanding. I got written statements from the bank clerks who had seen Kyle come in to make the withdrawals. I gathered screenshots of every attempt they'd made to open credit in my name. I even had a copy of the email where Mom had admitted they needed to get through to me. Proof of intent. While I built the case, I kept my silence. I didn't respond to calls, didn't rise to bait in the family group chat, which, thanks to my cousin, I still had eyes on. They thought I was still sulking, which was perfect. Then came the break I hadn't expected. One morning, Theo, my friend and coworker, dropped by my office with a grin. "You'll never believe who I ran into at the coffee shop," he said. "Some guy complaining about his business partner running off with his money. He mentioned your hometown." I frowned. "My hometown? Who?" Guy's name was Mark. Said he'd partnered with someone named Kyle on a sneaker resale venture, but the guy flaked on payments. Sounded like he's considering legal action. I felt a slow, cold satisfaction creep in. Of course Kyle was still running his little schemes. Of course he was burning bridges back home, just like he'd done with me. Later that night, I tracked Mark down through LinkedIn and sent him a polite message. Within a day, he called me, and what he told me nearly made me laugh out loud. Kyle had taken $20,000 from him as an investment in a new sneaker shop then used most of it to pay off overdue rent and car payments. The business never materialized. Mark had been trying to get answers for months, but kept getting excuses. I asked him if he had documentation, contracts, receipts, messages. He did. With his permission, I sent copies to my lawyer. This strengthens your case, the lawyer said immediately. It shows a clear pattern of financial misconduct. If we tie it together, it'll be very hard for them to claim ignorance. At this point, I wasn't just planning to recover my money. I was starting to think bigger. What if I could put a permanent stop to Kyle's ability to do this to anyone else? What if I could make sure the next person he targeted saw him for what he really was before handing over a dime? The idea of exposing the whole mess, not out of spite, but as a way of protecting other people, gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt before. This wasn't just revenge. It was accountability. I kept gathering, quietly, methodically. I pulled credit reports, court records, even screenshots of Kyle's social media posts bragging about leveling up his life. Posts that didn't match the reality of his financial disaster. By the time I was done, I had a dossier that painted the full picture. The fraud, the theft, the lies. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. Because the thing about revenge is that timing matters. You don't just fire off everything at once. You wait until they're comfortable, convinced that you've moved on, maybe even smug enough to think they've won. And sure enough, the next message I got from my mom suggested exactly that. Justin, we've decided to forgive you. Your brother is willing to let bygones be bygones if you'll come home for Christmas this year. I stared at that message for a long time, then set my phone down slowly. Forgive me. They thought I needed their forgiveness. That was the moment I knew it was time to stop waiting and start setting things in motion. I didn't answer my mom's message right away. I let it sit there, glowing on my phone screen like bait. If they thought they were forgiving me, they'd be lulled into believing the war was over. Good. Let them think that. The first step of my plan wasn't flashy. I instructed my lawyer to send Kyle a formal demand letter. It was calm, professional, and devastatingly specific. It listed the $7,500 withdrawal, the attempted credit applications, and the evidence we had that he'd used my information without permission. It included screenshots, dates, and statements from bank employees. It gave him 2 weeks to repay me in full, plus legal fees, or face a civil suit. I didn't send it from my personal email. It came directly from the law firm's letterhead. Clean, official, impossible to ignore. The reaction was immediate. 3 days later, I got a frantic voicemail from Mom, her voice shaking. Justin, what is this? A lawsuit? You can't sue your own brother. Take it back before you ruin his life. I didn't reply. Instead, I doubled down. With my lawyer's help, I filed an official fraud report with the credit bureau. That flagged the attempted credit line in my name and locked Kyle out of trying again. From now on, anytime he so much as tried to apply for credit using my name or SSN, it would trigger an alert to me. Then, with Mark's blessing, we filed a joint complaint to the state's Small Business Association, attaching every piece of documentation about the failed sneaker venture. That complaint automatically opened an investigation into Kyle's use of investor funds. The beauty of it all was that I wasn't shouting, wasn't threatening. I was quiet, surgical, letting the system do the heavy lifting. While the paperwork churned in the background, I worked on the social side of my revenge. Remember my cousin who had been sending me family chat screenshots? I sent him a single, very polite message. Hey, thanks for keeping me in the loop. If the family asks, don't mention anything about what I'm doing. Just tell them I'm focusing on work and might come home for the holidays. He agreed, and within days, I could see in the group chat screenshots that my parents were practically giddy. Dad, I think he's finally coming around. Knew he just needed time. Mom, this will be the Christmas we put the family back together. Kyle, yeah, sure, can't wait. I smiled reading that. Because when Christmas came, they were going to get something. Just not what they expected. 2 weeks later, right on schedule, Kyle's lawyer responded to the demand letter. It was full of bluster at first, claims that he had implied permission, that it was family money, that I was being malicious. My lawyer responded with a quiet, deadly calm. Provide documentation supporting your claim of implied permission. They had nothing. At the same time, the Small Business Association sent me a notice that they had opened a formal case against Kyle for misuse of investment funds. I didn't have to lift a finger, just forward Mark's documentation when requested. I didn't tell my family about any of this. Instead, I waited until December rolled around and then sent a single message to the group chat. I'll be home for Christmas. Can't wait to catch up. The reaction was exactly what I'd hoped. Mom sent heart emojis. Dad wrote, "Finally. Good to hear you've come to your senses." Even Kyle dropped a sarcastic yay, but I could tell they thought they'd won. I booked the ticket, packed a single bag, and boarded the plane with a folder full of documents, printed evidence of everything. The bank statements, the credit reports, the complaint filings, and even a notarized statement from my lawyer outlining the damages we were prepared to pursue if Kyle refused to settle. When I landed, I didn't go straight home. I went to the bank first and officially removed Kyle as a joint holder on the last remaining account. Then I opened a new account, moved every remaining dollar into it, and closed the old one entirely. By the time I left the branch, there was no way anyone but me could touch my money ever again. Christmas Eve, I showed up at my parents' house just as the whole family was gathering. Mom hugged me like nothing had ever happened. Dad clapped me on the back and said, "Good to have you back, son." I smiled politely and said, "Good to be back." Kyle was on the couch, scrolling on his phone. He barely looked up at me. Dinner was exactly what I expected. Cheerful small talk, a few tense jokes at my expense, a few digs about me finally coming to my senses. I just smiled and ate my food, letting them feel comfortable. When dessert was served, I stood up, cleared my throat, and set a folder on the table. "I have something to share," I said. The room went quiet. "This," I said, opening the folder, "is a full record of every unauthorized withdrawal made from my account over the last few years. This," I said, flipping to the next page, "is proof of attempted credit fraud in my name. And this," I laid down the final document, "is the formal complaint filed against you, Kyle, for misuse of investor funds." For a moment, nobody moved. Then Mom gasped, "Justin, what are you doing?" "Protecting myself," I said calmly. Dad's face darkened. "This is ridiculous. We can work this out as a family." "No," I interrupted, my voice steady. "I tried to work it out as a family. You sabotaged my lease. You stole from me. You tried to force me into debt. Those aren't family decisions. Those are hostile actions. So now we do this the proper way." Kyle stood up, red-faced. "You can't do this." "I already did," I said, sliding the settlement offer across the table. "Pay me back, in full, by the date listed, or this goes to court. And just so you know, the state is already looking into your sneaker scheme. You might want to start saving for a lawyer." The room exploded after that. Mom crying, Dad shouting, Kyle calling me every name he could think of. I just stood there, calm, collected, letting them rage. Because for once, I was the one in control. When they finally quieted down, I said, "You have 2 weeks. If I don't hear from your lawyer, I'll see you in court." Then I picked up my bag and walked out, leaving them all staring at the documents on the table. I didn't look back as I walked out of the house. The December air was icy, but it felt clean on my face, like I'd just stepped out of a smoky room. My hands were steady as I unlocked my rental car. For the first time in years, I felt completely in control, not just of my money, but of my life. I flew back the next morning, leaving my parents and Kyle to stew in the wreckage of that Christmas dinner. I expected silence after that, but within days, the calls started again. First Mom, tearful, apologetic this time. "Justin," she said, her voice cracking, "you can't really mean this. You'd destroy your brother's future over a misunderstanding." I didn't raise my voice. "Mom, this isn't a misunderstanding. It's theft, fraud, and harassment. If you want this to go away, have him pay me back. If not, we go to court." She tried guilt. "What will the neighbors think? The family. That's not my problem anymore." I hung up. 3 days later, Kyle's lawyer reached out again, this time with a very different tone. They wanted to settle. We negotiated through my attorney, and in the end, Kyle had to pay back every cent he'd taken, plus my legal fees. When the transfer cleared, I stared at the notification on my phone and felt a strange mix of relief and vindication. But the fallout was only beginning. Word spread through the extended family about what had happened. At first, my parents tried to spin it, saying I had overreacted and humiliated them. But then my lawyer sent them a formal notice about their role in the lease termination, accompanied by copies of the paperwork they had filed using my personal information. That shut them up fast. By February, Kyle's sneaker investor had filed his own suit. Because I had shared documentation with him, his case moved quickly, and within months Kyle had a judgment against him for repayment. His car was repossessed shortly after. I heard through my cousin that Kyle had to move back in with my parents. The house that had once felt like their kingdom was suddenly a pressure cooker. Three people trapped together, all pointing fingers. They fight all the time now, my cousin reported one night over video chat. Your dad says Kyle ruined the family's reputation. Your mom says you betrayed them. And Kyle? Well, Kyle just keeps blaming you for everything. I smiled at that. Good. Let him blame me. Maybe it'll keep him from trying this on someone else. Life overseas kept getting better. I got another promotion, bought a condo with cash from my investment gains, and started building a circle of friends who felt more like family than my actual relatives ever had. I even started mentoring new hires at work, helping them navigate career paths, something I wished I'd had when I was younger. Every so often, my parents would send a message, not angry anymore, but almost pleading. We'd like to talk. Can we put this behind us? Your brother is struggling. He's not himself. Each time, I sent the same reply. I hope you get the help you need. I've moved on. Eventually, the messages stopped. A year later, I was invited to speak at a major conference in my industry. As I stood on stage, looking out at the packed room, I thought about how far I'd come, from sitting on a bare apartment floor, feeling like I'd lost everything, to this moment. After the talk, I went back to my hotel room and saw a single unread message on my phone. It was from Dad. We sold the house. Just thought you should know. That was it. No apology, no attempt to reconnect. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the message. Then I typed a single reply. Good. Maybe now you'll stop trying to live off me. And I put my phone down for the last time. Because here's the thing about walking away. Once you finally do it, once you stop begging for scraps of love and respect, you realize how light it feels to never turn back. I didn't just win. I ended the game entirely. And that was the last time they had any power over me.